A Deathworlder human faced an alien army and wiped them out completely. The arrival of the storm. The Zalkara were a name feared across the galaxy, a species of brutal, hulking warriors known for their insatiable hunger for conquest. The Zalkara had annihilated entire planets and turned whole star systems into war zones. Their military strategies were ruthless, their tactics merciless. They came from a cold, barren world where survival meant fending off lethal predators, and every day was a battle to live. But they had never encountered a Deathworlder. Earth had always been a quiet, backwater planet in the eyes of the galactic community, isolated, far from the prying eyes of the war-hardened species that governed the stars. No one had expected the humans to be anything more than primitive, barely capable of surviving beyond their home system. Then came Captain Maya Kincaid. Maya wasn't like the other humans. She had been born and raised on a harsh frontier world, a planet that had earned its nickname, Hellstone, for a reason. The environment was so brutal that only the strongest could survive. The wildlife was deadly, the storms relentless, and the resources scarce. It was a planet where every step could be your last, where humans fought not only against nature but also against their own instincts, their own fears, to carve out a life. But what Maya didn't know as a child, what she'd learned only when she joined the Interstellar Coalition forces, was that her survival instincts were something other species couldn't even fathom. Maya Kincaid had survived in places no one else could. She'd been raised by the roughest, most resilient people the galaxy had ever known, humans, and she had learned one thing above all else: never underestimate a Deathworlder. The first attack came from the Zalkara fleet in the dead of night. They had arrived at Earth's outermost colonies without warning, their ships, massive, cloaked warships, suddenly breaking through the atmosphere. The initial bombardment was devastating. Whole colonies vanished in a single, earth-shattering blow. Their capital, New Elysium, crumbled into ruins as the Zalkara tore through their defenses with clinical precision. Yet, even as the ashes of humanity's finest hour smoldered, something changed. There was one human still out there, one Deathworlder who wasn't about to go down quietly. Maya stood on the battlefield, her breath steady as the ground shook beneath her boots. The Zalkara had landed, massive, armored titans that towered over their foes, clad in chitinous armor and wielding weapons capable of shredding entire cities. Hundreds of them, with their yellow eyes burning through the night, advanced toward her position. The air reeked of sulfur, the sky blotted out by their heavy warships. Around her, the remains of Earth's last defense, a ragtag group of survivors, military soldiers, and civilians, had fallen back, desperate to regroup. But not Maya. She didn't retreat. She was never one to back down, not from a storm, not from predators, and certainly not from alien invaders. With a single motion, she raised her Scorched Eagle rifle, the weapon designed for close-quarters combat in the hostile jungles of Hellstone. Its plasma rounds were designed to tear through flesh and bone, meant for the world's most dangerous predators. But she knew this was something different. The Zalkara were far from mere beasts. They were strategists, and every one of them knew how to wage war. "Take them down, Kincaid," she muttered to herself, her lips curling into a grim smile. "You've done it 1,000 times before." She toggled the switch on her helmet, and a heads-up display illuminated her field of vision. Her systems went live: targeting systems, defense fields, situational analysis. One Zalkara warrior charged at her, his massive form cutting through the smoke-filled landscape with terrifying speed. His weapon, a massive blade that could slice through steel, swung down in a death arc. But Maya was already there. She ducked low, the blade missing by mere inches, and fired. The plasma shot hit the alien's chest with an ear-splitting crack, igniting a chain reaction that caused the creature to explode in a violent spray of viscera. But Maya didn't stop. She moved faster than they could react, rolling to her feet and unleashing a barrage of shots, each one finding its mark. The Zalkara around her froze. They had heard of humans before, of course, the stories, the rumors, the legends, Deathworlders, but until that moment, they had never faced one up close. They had underestimated the humans. Now, As Maya stood amidst the smoke and the corpses of the Zalkara soldiers, they began to understand. This was no ordinary species, this was something entirely different. Maya's battle had only just begun. As the night wore on, the Zalkara fleet descended in full force, sending waves of warriors to engage her. But they hadn't counted on human ingenuity. They hadn't prepared for the brutality of a Deathworlder. For every Zalkara warrior that fell, two more took their place, but Maya Kincaid didn't hesitate. She didn't retreat. She fought with a ferocity, with a rage, that the Zalkara had never seen before. She was their nightmare. As the battle raged on, one thing became clear: the Zalkara had just made their worst mistake. They had invaded Earth. And Maya Kincaid was about to show them exactly why that was the worst decision they'd ever made. The storm unleashed. The Zalkara had a reputation. They were merciless conquerors, ruthless in their precision and terrifying in their strength. But there was one thing they had failed to account for in their invasion of Earth: Maya Kincaid. As the sun set on the war-torn landscape, her name was already being whispered in fear across the Zalkara ranks. She was no longer just a soldier. She had become the embodiment of vengeance. The Zalkara command ship, the Righteous Fury, hovered high above the battleground, watching the bloodshed unfold below. The alien fleet had deployed its full force on Earth's surface, but their best soldiers were being torn apart, one, by a single human. Every strategy they had, every battle plan, was crumbling in the face of something they could neither understand nor defeat. On the Righteous Fury, the commander of the Zalkara invasion, General Var, stood overlooking the chaos, his fangs glinting in the dim light. His powerful build, adorned with ceremonial armor, had struck terror into the hearts of many, but even he was now beginning to feel the pressure. Maya Kincaid had already destroyed 3 waves of his elite warriors. "The human, she's unlike anything we've encountered," Var growled, his voice like a rasping snarl. "We need a different approach." He turned to his tactical officers. "Deploy the Zilner Swarm." The Zilner Swarm were an ancient weapon of the Zalkara, genetically engineered combatants designed for one purpose: to overwhelm and destroy. They were faster than the standard Zalkara soldier, more intelligent, and most importantly, relentless. Var knew that Maya Kincaid was no ordinary soldier, but the swarm had a singular advantage: they never stopped, never hesitated. She might have survived the Zalkara warriors, but this time, she would face something different, something that could not be defeated by sheer skill alone. Meanwhile, Maya had no time to rest. Her mind raced with calculations, the same instinctive precision that had kept her alive for decades on the unforgiving world of Hellstone. She had been trained to adapt, to survive, and now, she could feel the tide of battle shifting. The Zalkara had underestimated humanity, and that was their ultimate mistake. Every Zalkara warrior she faced fell with a crunching thud, their bodies riddled with holes from her plasma rounds. Their shields were useless against her weaponry, and their combat prowess, while formidable, couldn't compare to her relentless strategy. She fought with the precision of a predator and the heart of a Deathworlder, a human who had lived through the worst the universe had to offer. Yet she knew that this would not last forever. She had heard the rumors, the whispers of something worse in the Zalkara ranks. She had expected it. Of course, they were calculating, methodical. They had to have a contingency plan. And soon enough, she saw the first signs of it. From the shadows of the ruins, strange lights flickered, and a new wave of Zalkara emerged. These weren't the heavy hitters she had faced before. No, these were quicker, their bodies a blur of motion. Their eyes were cold and calculating, and their movements, too precise, too coordinated, were unmistakable. The Zilner Swarm. Maya's instincts screamed at her: retreat, regroup, call for backup. But she had no intention of running. Not now, not when Earth and every soul on this planet depended on her. She tightened her grip on her rifle and activated her combat visor. Her heads-up display flooded with data, tracking the Zilner's movements, analyzing their patterns. They were fast, but predictable. The Zalkara were known for their ferocity, but they lacked one key element in battle: they were too dependent on strength. Maya, however, relied on strategy. She made the first move, darting into the shadows of a collapsed building. Maya vanished from sight. The Zilner swarm fanned out, scanning the area, but they couldn't track her. Her environment was her ally. In the desolate ruins, she was as much a part of the terrain as the rubble itself. She struck first. A Zilner warrior, its sleek body twisting unnaturally, darted forward with lightning speed, but Maya was already there. Her plasma rifle raised, a quick burst to the chest, and the creature collapsed in a heap, but it didn't stop the rest. A dozen more swarmed in from all sides, their movements so swift that they seemed to shimmer in the air. Maya's heart raced, the adrenaline flooding her system, but her training took over. She didn't hesitate. She ducked low, rolled behind a fallen pillar, and activated a decoy grenade. The grenade emitted a high-pitched whine and a burst of blinding light, causing the Zilner to momentarily falter. It was all Maya needed. One by one, she took them down. Their attempts to overwhelm her were futile. She was faster. She was smarter. She had fought harder, lived longer than any of them ever would. Meanwhile, on the Righteous Fury, General Var seethed in frustration. The swarm was not enough. It never would be. But there was still one card he had left to play. Deploy the Omega Legion, he ordered, his voice tight with frustration. The Omega Legion were Zalkara's last resort, an ancient order of warriors enhanced beyond normal limits, forged through genetic engineering and dark rituals. These were not soldiers, they were monsters, designed to be the perfect killing machines. They were faster, stronger, and far more intelligent than anything the Zalkara had ever created before. If they couldn't take Maya Kincaid down, no one would. Maya stood alone amidst the bodies of the fallen Zilner warriors, her breath steady despite the chaos that surrounded her. She had expected the swarm to be a challenge, but they were just another obstacle in her path. She had faced worse, survived worse. But the faint vibrations in the ground beneath her feet told her something had changed. She wasn't just fighting for Earth anymore, she was fighting for humanity's place in the stars. And she would fight until every last Zalkara warrior lay dead at her feet. The Omega Legion. The Omega Legion descended like a storm. In the span of seconds, the air was filled with the sound of rushing wind and the heavy thud of armored boots. They were unlike anything Maya had faced before, the apex of Zalkara warfare. The very earth trembled as they landed, their figures hulking and intimidating, clad in dark, blood-red armor that seemed to absorb the light around them. Their eyes glowed with a fiery intensity, and the air around them hummed with a palpable energy, a terrifying power that had been years in the making. Maya stood alone amidst the ruins of a broken city, her rifle in hand. She didn't flinch, she didn't back away. She had faced impossible odds before, and she had survived. General Var stood at the command deck of the Righteous Fury, watching the transmission as the Omega Legion deployed. The screen flickered, showing the towering figures of the Omega Legionnaires touching down in the battleground with devastating precision. They were monsters, true, enhanced in every way, physically, mentally, and chemically. These warriors weren't just soldiers, they were war machines, designed for the sole purpose of killing. She will fall, Var said, his voice cold, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, doubt. Even he wasn't certain the Omega Legion could do what the previous forces could not. But he had no choice now. His fleet was already taking damage from the ongoing skirmishes, and Earth was proving more resilient than he had anticipated. If he couldn't break her, if he couldn't break humanity's resolve, then nothing would stand between the Zalkara and total conquest. Maya tightened her grip on her rifle, her fingers dancing over the controls of her combat suit. Her visor displayed live data on the Omega Legion's approach. She could see the heat signatures, the rapid movement, the sheer intensity of their power. They were fast, too fast. Maya's breath caught in her throat. There was no time to waste. She needed to take control of the situation before they could organize into their advanced tactics. There was no room for hesitation. She'd taken down hundreds of Zalkara warriors, each one more lethal than the last, but these were different. She had to be smarter than them, faster. she launched herself into motion. The first Omega Legionnaire came crashing toward her, his massive form tearing through the rubble. He was as tall as a building, his armor blackened and scarred from countless battles, but even with that intimidating presence, Maya did not hesitate. She dove to the side, narrowly avoiding his energy hammer as it crashed into the ground, sending a shockwave of power through the city block. But Maya was already on her feet. She could see his pattern. His strike had been a predictable one. She fired her rifle, hitting him square in the knee joint. The blast exploded on impact, sending shards of armor and bone flying, but the creature didn't go down. Instead, it roared a deafening sound that shook the air and swung his hammer in a wide arc, trying to catch her off guard. Maya ducked and rolled, narrowly evading the blast radius as she activated her phase shift grenade. The grenade emitted a pulse, temporarily distorting the local space around her. For just a fraction of a second, time seemed to slow, giving her enough space to slip behind the Omega Warrior and fire a plasma burst directly into the exposed gaps of his armor. The Legionnaire crumpled like a ragdoll. But before she could even celebrate, the second Omega Legionnaire was already upon her. This one moved differently. He was faster, more agile, and smarter. His red visor locked onto Maya's position, predicting her every move. He launched a burst of plasma grenades, and Maya was forced to dive to the ground, rolling behind a chunk of debris to avoid the explosion. They were adapting, she realized. The Omega Legionnaires were no longer relying on brute strength alone. They were studying her, learning from every move she made. And that scared her. Meanwhile, in the sky above, the righteous fury loomed. General Var's eyes narrowed as he watched Maya engage the Omega Legion. He had heard the whispers, seen the aftermath of her battles, but he had never imagined it would come to this. "She's no ordinary human," he muttered. "No, she's something else." The screens before him displayed multiple data points. Maya Kincaid, moving with the precision of a machine, a human woman fighting like a force of nature. "Deploy Reaper units," Var ordered, his voice steely with resolve. If the Omega Legion couldn't break her, then perhaps it was time to unleash the last option. Back on the ground, Maya was wounded. A shard of alien metal had embedded itself in her side, blood seeping through the fabric of her combat suit. But she didn't stop. She never stopped. She gritted her teeth and slammed the reinforced bandage into place, the nanotech threads quickly sealing the wound. Her armor hissed as the self-repair system kicked in. She was already on her feet again, eyes blazing, scanning the battlefield. The third Omega Legionnaire was approaching. Its movements were predatory, its every step calculated. And then, she saw it. A tiny flaw, the weakest point in its sword arm. It was a long shot, but she had to take it. Maya drew her shockwave rifle, aimed, and fired. The shot blasted through the air, a brilliant arc of white-hot energy. The Omega Legionnaire's sword arm exploded in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. It howled in agony, staggered backward, but Maya was already there. Her instincts kicked in. She launched herself at the downed warrior, slamming her combat knife into its exposed neck joint, severing the vital nerve cluster. The Omega Legionnaire's body jerked once, then went still. Maya took a breath, wiped the sweat from her brow, and glanced around. The battlefield was quiet, too quiet. Just as she began to assess her next move, a new force dropped from the clouds above. Reaper units. The darkest of the Zalcaris weapons. These were the elite of the elite bioengineered soldiers whose bodies had been twisted into monstrous forms. Their limbs were long, like that of a spider, and their faces of twisted, hollow masks. They carried weaponry that vibrated the air with deadly force, their hands equipped with energy claws capable of cutting through the thickest of armor. Maya's eyes widened, but there was no fear in her heart, just a deep, resounding rage. She had fought worse. But this time, the odds were different. This time, humanity would rise. The Reapers fall. The Reaper units hovered above the battlefield, their mechanical limbs clicking and whirring as they descended from the sky with terrifying speed. Their glowing eyes scanned the ground, focusing in on Maya with an unsettling, predatory precision. These were the ultimate soldiers, the culmination of centuries of Zalkara genetic manipulation and cruel experimentation. But as they landed, their feet sending shockwaves through the earth, one thing became painfully clear. They were not prepared for Maya Kincaid. Maya wiped the blood from her brow and stood tall. She was alone, wounded, and facing a new wave of Zalkara that could very well end her. But the will to survive, the human instinct that had carried her through every hardship, surged within her chest like a firestorm. She raised her shockwave rifle and lined up her sights. The Reapers were fast, dangerously fast, but they were not invincible. There were weaknesses, and Maya had learned to spot them. Every Zalkara warrior had their own patterns, their own vulnerabilities. These creatures were no different. She took a breath, steadying herself. One of the Reapers, a massive figure with long, insectoid arms, lunged toward her. It moved like a blur, and in an instant, it was almost upon her. Maya's mind raced. Now! She dove to the side, rolling through the dirt and debris as the Reaper's energy claws slashed through the air where she had been standing. The air vibrated with the sound of metal scraping metal, but Maya was already back on her feet, just a few steps behind her attacker. Her rifle came to life, sending a powerful shot straight into the Reaper's exposed underbelly. The blast punched through its thick armor, but the creature didn't go down. Instead, it whirled on her, bringing its claws down in a violent arc. But this time, Maya was ready. She leaped backward, her combat suit enhancing her agility as she somersaulted in midair, landing in a crouch just out of the Reaper's reach. The creature's claws missed by inches, but that was all Maya needed. She triggered the plasma charge attached to her belt, hurling it at the Reaper. The explosive device detonated with a deafening roar, sending a shockwave of heat and fire into the air. The Reaper stumbled, its legs buckling under the force of the blast. It was wounded, vulnerable. But as Maya prepared to deliver the final blow, the air above her shimmered. From the shadows of the ruined buildings, another Reaper appeared, a second, then a third, until the entire battlefield was swarming with them. The odds were against her. Maya knew it. She could feel her body protesting with every movement. The bleeding wound in her side burned, the fatigue setting in. But her mind was sharp, and she knew that if she didn't act now, humanity's future would be sealed in blood and ashes. As the Omega Legion and Reaper units closed in on her, Maya's mind clicked into overdrive. She was fighting a war on two fronts, the aliens who wanted to take over Earth and the relentless ticking clock of time. She was outnumbered, outgunned, and on the verge of collapse, but this wasn't her first time staring death in the face. It was time to give them hell. From the corner of her eye, Maya spotted the Central Command Unit, the Righteous Fury, still hovering above the battlefield. Var was up there, watching her every move. He was no longer confident. Maya could see it in his face. Even from a distance, the fear was starting to grow. She had been fighting long enough to know what fear looked like, even in the eyes of an alien general. Fear of the human who refused to die. Maya switched her rifle to overdrive mode, the energy levels soaring. She could feel the heat of the weapon as the electromagnetic charge surged. One final shot. She aimed directly at the center of the Righteous Fury's command deck. It was a gamble, a long shot. The odds were insane. But it was her only chance. Maya activated her teleportation beacon, sending a pulse through the air that would send her one last leap toward victory. The world around her blurred as she felt the familiar tug of the quantum teleport. In an instant, she was above the battlefield, high in the sky, staring directly at the heart of the Righteous Fury. General Var had just issued his orders to deploy reinforcements when the blinding light flooded his command deck. He turned in time to see the human, Maya Kincaid, appear before him, suspended in midair, suspended by the sheer force of will. She was floating there, rifle in hand, and her gaze locked onto him with the intensity of a predator. Before Var could react, she fired. The plasma beam shot forward, striking the Righteous Fury with the force of a supernova. The ship's hull shuddered under the impact, its engines sputtering as the power core failed. The force of the blast sent a shockwave across the battlefield, knocking the Zalkara forces off their feet. The righteous fury went silent, its once menacing silhouette now a smoldering wreck in the sky. As the remnants of the alien fleet began to fall from the heavens, the Reaper units paused. Their sensors scanned the wreckage, the fallen Omega Legionnaires, and the remnants of their once mighty force. Their processing units whirred in confusion. Humanity had won. Maya Kincaid stood tall, her body battered and bloodied, but her resolve unshaken. She had won. She had wiped out an entire alien army. Her victory was not just a tactical one, it was a symbol, a testament to humanity's unyielding spirit. As the last of the Zalkara forces retreated, fleeing back into the stars, Maya stood alone on the battlefield, looking over the wreckage. The cries of victory echoed from the remaining survivors, humans who had fought beside her, but Maya's thoughts were already far beyond the field of battle. Her mission was complete, but the war was just beginning. Earth had proven it could stand against the invaders. Humanity had proven it could stand against the universe. And now, as the stars loomed overhead, Maya Kincaid knew one truth. Humanity's place in the galaxy had been secured. And no one, no alien force, would ever threaten it again.